Hey, I'm glad you can spend a few minutes with me today looking at the new TimeTrack graphing system. TimeTrack has always been a great tool for SAMs and principals to use to organize the principal's time and begin being reflective about whether that time is likely going to change teacher practice in a positive way. One of the things we've been concerned about with TimeTrack, though, is whether or not the graphing system was easy to use. We now have a new graphing system with a single point of entry, and it's entirely interactive. If I click on this icon of a graph, it takes me to a dashboard. This dashboard takes me everywhere and anywhere I want to go and gives me a variety of information I've never been able to easily access before. Anywhere I put my cursor on these graphs, I will get a label. Those of you who use iPads will be pleased to know that this will work on your iPad as well, even though you don't have a cursor on an iPad. There'll be a button on your iPad display when you're looking at your TimeTrack graphs that allows you to use hover mode, so you'll be able to get these labels too. Those of you using Android devices will be pleased to know that TimeTrack now supports Android and vice versa, so it's going to work wherever you go. Now, if I go over to this upper right-hand side, you're going to see this is the instructional time spent, and it's showing the top 5 investments with individuals. If I put my cursor over Barbara Antilli's name, you see that I get a label that says I've spent 66 hours and 38 minutes with her. Let's go over to this teacher, Catherine Valorum. I'm going to go ahead and click Catherine's bar. Now I get a representation showing the overall time I've spent with Catherine. It shows all 14 descriptors, and it shows them in descending order so you can see where she spent the most amount of time, and then descends down. If I put my cursor over any bar, it will tell me then in label form what I'm looking at. If I double click the bar, it will then take me to another layer of information. So I'm still looking at Catherine Valorum, but now I'm looking at the time I spent with her in planning, curriculum, and assessment broken out by month. If I go over to the bar for April, it tells me I spent 3 hours with her in planning, curriculum, and assessment meetings during the month of April. If I click again, it will show me which day I did the time with Catherine. Now, in terms of navigating here, you can see that you can get quite deep into detail with these graphs. I have 2 choices for returning to where I started. I can click Dashboard, the tab at the top, and it will take me back to the beginning, and it resets everything. So it takes me right back to the beginning. Or I can use my browser's back arrow to take me back to the last page I saw. In this case, I want to go back to the dashboard, so I click Dashboard. I go back and I'm looking at the top 5 time investments in this upper right-hand corner. So let's go back to Catherine Valorum again, and let's look at her graph that's showing the overall time I've spent for this school year. Now I know that it's this school year because up at the top of the graph it says July 2013 to the present. So it's showing all the time starting in July of 2013 to the present day I've spent with this particular teacher. So you're familiar with the 14 descriptors, and so it's easy to see that any of these descriptors I can click on and it will tell me when I did it, and I can then explore further, like peeling back layers of an onion. There's something else that's different here. You can see that there's a representation of a pie graph in the upper right-hand side. This pie graph is comparing all of the feedback time to all of the observation time. So I can see that 80%, if I'm just comparing feedback to observation, 80% has been in observation, about 20% in feedback. Now you see we use a new term here, combined feedback, combined observation. Let me show you what that means. I'm going to put my cursor on the part of the pie graph that represents combined feedback. You can see that the combined feedback represents 6.6% of all of the 14 instructional descriptors, time I've spent. If I click on that part of the pie graph, now I see the way I did my feedback. 75%, or 5% of the total instructional time I spent with this teacher, was in non-directive feedback. I can see that 25% of my total feedback, or 1.7% of the total instructional time, was in directive feedback, and 0% was in celebratory feedback. There he is, 0%. Now, the other thing we look at, and I'm going to click the observation button up in the upper right-hand corner so I get a different view. I can now see how I observed this teacher. 60% of the time, or a total of 16.8% of my total instructional time with this teacher, was in walkthrough, a kind of observation. 29%, or 8% of the total instructional time, was in instructional student supervision, being in a classroom, watching the teacher teach, and redirecting student behavior. 10% of my instructional time in terms of observation was in formal observation. And then lastly was to work with students. So these four are, when we combine them together, become my combined feedback. So let's go back to this screen, which is now showing my overall time with this particular instructor. I can explore any of the 14 descriptors, and by clicking on the bar, I'll get additional information. I can click on the pie graph and get a breakout of how I spent my time in observation and feedback. The last piece I want to show you on this particular graph is in the bottom left-hand corner, and you'll see a blue link that says frequency. If I click this link, this takes me to a breakout of when I spent my time with this particular teacher. So again, it's July through the present with Catherine Valorum. If I put my cursor over any one of the bars and the section of color, it will tell me what I'm looking at. If I click that section, it will now give me a breakout of the time I spent in professional development with this particular teacher and when. Anytime I wish to go back to the start, I click Dashboard. That takes me back to my first point of entry and resets everything. The next thing I want to show you, we're going to stick over on the right-hand side with instructional time spent broken out by classroom teachers. If I click the Expand button in the bottom left-hand corner, it takes me to a breakout that shows my time spent with each teacher in the building. I can put my cursor over any teacher, in this case Wes Windu. If I double-click his bar, it's going to give me the same kind of representation I saw before when I was looking at Catherine Valorum. I'm going to use my browser back button and go back to this view. The next thing I'd like to show you is options. TimeTrack now has a variety of viewing options. You probably remember that I mentioned earlier that this date range at the top is showing what date range is represented by the particular graph. The reason I'm highlighting that is you can now change that date range. Instead of looking at the current year, I have a lot of options. I can pick the last month, the last 6 weeks, last 2 months, 3 months, or I can even customize a date range. If I've worked with this teacher over multiple years, I can also look at 2 or 3 years at a time. I'm going to do a custom date range now, and instead of looking at July 1st, 2013, I'm going to look at January 1st, 2014. So I'll just look at the second semester to 6/30/2014. I click Apply. And now I see a different representation because it's showing me January through the present. And so the time I spent, in terms of who I spent, is going to change a bit as well. If I wish to reset this, if I want it to show me what the current date range or the full year date range, there's a couple of ways I can do it. I can go to Show Options and just change the date range to the current year. The other thing I can do is click Dashboard, because anytime I click that Dashboard tab, it's going to take me back to the beginning and reset everything to the school year. Next thing I wanted to show you is how you can look at this differently. Currently, I'm looking at the graph of all the time I've spent with particular or teachers within my building, and I'm looking at it in descending order. Instead, I can do it by name. So I'm going to go down to Sort by Name. And instead of showing it all the teachers, I want to spread it out a bit so it's easier to see. So I click Apply. So now I see it a little bit differently. The big difference is, and I'm going to use my little spotlight here, is now I'm seeing the full school year because under options I went back to the full year. Next thing that's different is I'm seeing teachers 1 through 33. Third thing that's different is I'm seeing them in alphabetical order instead of descending order based on the time spent. I can choose to double click on any one of these teachers and I will be able to get that breakout of time spent with them just like I did before. I can click on any bar, I can click on the pie piece, and it's going to take me to more information. Also under Show Options, you'll see that I can select all individuals, or I could compare particular individuals or a group, or I could select the individuals I wish to look for. So the option menu gives me a variety of tools I have not had before. So I can look at the last 6 weeks, I can look at all instructional descriptors, or I could just pick some like feedback or walkthrough. And then I can pick the teachers I want to look at, and then I can click Apply. It will then pull out just those teachers. So there's a variety of ways you can use this. And again, to go back to the beginning, I simply click Dashboard. So you can see that this structure is very interactive, very easy to use. We looked at the instructional time spent with the top 5 individuals. Right below that is instructional time spent with top 5 groups. This section works just like the section you just saw. In the centerpiece, you see top 5 instructional descriptors for the principal's overall time. If I click on any one of the bars, it will take me to more information and who I did it with. And so I could look here, walkthrough. I can see I spent 99 hours in walkthrough. If I click it, it's going to take me to a breakout of all the people in my building based on the walkthrough time I spent. So you can see how this could be really valuable. If I expand this out, it's going to show me the principal's overall instructional time broken out into the 14 descriptors. Now I can always click on any bar like professional development, and it will give me a breakout of who I did professional development with. If I click on that individual person's name, it will break it out further in terms of when I did it with this, in this case, Matt Rada. If I click on the individual bar, it will break it out even further. To return to home, I click Dashboard. Next thing I want to show you is something that I think is a pretty cool change in TimeTrack, and that is the ability to pull out the 3 target descriptors. When you first start working in TimeTrack, you look at your baseline data and you decide where you'd like to spend more time instructionally. In this case, we're comparing the TimeTrack or shadowing data with your TimeTrack data. So for observation walkthrough, this particular principal said he wanted to do more of that than what his baseline showed. His baseline showed 8.7%. Excuse me, he is currently doing 8.7% under TimeTrack, and his baseline was 10.4%. So he has not increased the amount of time he's doing an observation and walkthrough. The second area he picked as a target was feedback. He's actually doing more feedback, 3.2%. Than he did at just under 1% when he was shadowed. Same for planning curriculum and assessment. He's doing more planning curriculum assessment than he did when he was shadowed. So this gives you a different look at how the principal is spending time. Another way of looking at this will be, you'll see on your main calendar page. And so we're going to return to calendar. And we're going to open up an event. And you'll see that in the bottom left-hand corner of the event entry box, you have your 3 targeted descriptors. But in this case, instead of being in black with the flames, you see 1 is in red and 2 are in green. That's because for observation, the actual time spent is less than the baseline, although feedback, non-directive, and planning curriculum assessment have increased. This is just a visual reminder of how you're doing on your targeted descriptors. I'm sure you remember, but you set your targeted descriptors by going up to Settings, going to General Options, And down at the bottom, you'll see the 3 targeted descriptors, and there's a drop-down menu. You can change these targeted descriptors anytime. Just make sure to click the Save button when you're done. Before we finish up with graphs, I want to, before we leave the calendar page and go back to the last piece of graphs I wish to show you, I want to show you a change in the main calendar page that I think you will find helpful. And let me use my little spotlight. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see a printer icon. This printer icon allows you to print anything you're seeing and gives you some options. In this case, I could include the calendar header, in this case the name of the principal, or I could also just print the time blocks. Some principals would like to be able to print their calendar so other people can see that they are scheduled for things but not really show what they're scheduled for. And so in the case of a principal, and we'll go to the one-day view, who might want to show people his entire calendar for what he's doing this day, it's going to show all the labels. But if instead the principal would like to just show when he is available, we click Print Only Time Blocks, and I'm also going to include open times, because here's another change. This is now showing on the right-hand side of the calendar the time the principal is not scheduled. So these are a couple of changes I think you will find useful. So on the one-day calendar view, you see the open times are listed on the far right-hand side, and you can print by showing all the detail or not, and you can also show the open times. So some nice changes in terms of printing TimeTrack information. Well, the last thing I want to show you on TimeTrack graphs is the 2 additional tabs I have not shared with you yet. If you look on the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that there's a Chart tab and an Annual tab. Those do just pretty much what you probably thought they do. If I click the Annual, it is going to show me a comparison of my time task, my shadowing data, with my TimeTrack data. It will also show me the descriptors for each, but on the far right-hand side, there will be a chart showing me the TimeTrack and time task information and a comparison. If I click the Chart tab on the bottom left-hand corner, I get a different representation just showing my TimeTrack information. So on the right-hand side, I see a chart that shows me all of my TimeTrack data for the year. Now I can change this too. I can go ahead and change the date range if I wish. Right now it's showing me the full year. So TimeTrack gives you a wide variety of choices now to look at data. The most important thing in using TimeTrack graphs is to keep asking yourself, is it likely I'm getting the change of teaching practice I desire based on what I'm currently doing with an individual teacher or a group? In looking at that, it's helpful to look at the teacher and break out how the time is being used and ask yourself if there's connectivity here. Is there the right percentage right for you? Observation to feedback. What descriptors am I spending time with this particular teacher? If there was a lot of professional development, was there a walkthrough that followed? That's where the frequency can become really important. So TimeTrack graphs is structured for you to have easy access for all of the data you have with teachers and groups in your building. Well, we're back to the main calendar page now, and I want to again thank you for spending a few minutes with me today seeing how this new graphing system can work. We're going to be training all of the time change coaches in the new graphing system this summer in Louisville. We're also going to be sending you a print document that shows a variety of different ways you can use the graphing system. But you know, the best way to use it is just do it. Play with it. You can't break it. You can always get back to home by clicking that little tab that says Dashboard, and you're going to find that there's a wealth of information here that are going to should lead you to the kind of questions you can ask in a daily meeting to help each other get better. Hey, wish you a great summer and hope you enjoy TimeTrack graphs.